Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be treated like property? Song Si never imagined her husband would sell her to a CEO as part of a business deal. Her world shattered in an instant as Zhang Jinghong signed away her life with a cold, calculating smile, a transaction that would unexpectedly change everything. What Song Si couldn't have predicted was that Mr. Han, the powerful CEO who now owned her, would look at her with eyes that held something other than possession. As their story unfolds, you'll witness how a woman sold for convenience discovers her strength, and how a man who bought a wife finds something he never knew he was missing. Subscribe now to follow Song Si's journey from object to empowered, like this video, and share it with others who appreciate stories of resilience against unimaginable odds. The morning light filtered through the silk curtains of Song Chi's new bedroom, illuminating the opulence that surrounded her. The marble floors gleamed beneath her feet as 3 servants moved around her with practiced efficiency, preparing her for the day ahead. Song Si stood motionless, arms slightly extended as they draped her in a silk dress that cascaded over her form like water. The fabric alone cost more than her entire month's salary from her previous life, a thought that left a bitter taste in her mouth despite the luxury. The emerald or the sapphire earrings would complement this ensemble perfectly, madam, one servant suggested, presenting a velvet tray of jewelry that glittered under the chandelier's light. Song Si merely nodded, unable to find her voice as she stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror wore exquisite clothes and stood in a mansion that would make royalty envious, yet her eyes held a vacancy that no amount of wealth could fill. She barely recognized herself. As a diamond bracelet was clasped around her wrist, the cold weight of the stones against her skin triggered a flash of memory. Zhang Jinghong sitting across from Mr. Han in a sterile conference room, signing documents with a casual flick of his wrist. Her husband hadn't even looked at her as he traded her away like a commodity, his pen scratching against paper, the only sound in that moment when her life changed forever. The diamonds now encircling her wrist were merely physical manifestations of the invisible chains that bound her to this new life. Mrs. Han's skin is so fair, almost like porcelain. One maid whispered to another, the words carrying easily across the cavernous dressing room. Do you think that's why he wanted her so badly? Another servant responded with a hushed tone. I heard it was a business arrangement. Mr. Zhang apparently owed Mr. Han quite substantially. Her eyes darted nervously to Song Chi, clearly unaware that their new mistress could hear every word. Business arrangement or not, no normal man trades his wife away, the third maid added, adjusting a pin in Song Chi's hair. There must be something special about her that caught Mr. Han's attention. The wealthy never do anything without multiple motives. Song Chi maintained her composed expression, years of enduring her husband's cruelty having taught her to conceal her reactions. But inside, a hollow ache spread through her chest. Even here, among strangers, she was reduced to an object of curiosity and speculation, a puzzle for others to solve rather than a human being with her own thoughts and feelings. Glancing up, she noticed the small, unobtrusive camera nestled in the corner of the ceiling, its lens catching the light as it rotated slightly to follow her movements. Similar devices were positioned throughout her suite, the bedroom, the sitting area, even discreetly angled toward her private bathroom. Her new quarters spanned an entire wing of Mr. Han's estate, featuring a collection of rare art, custom furniture, and a terrace overlooking meticulously landscaped gardens that stretched to a distant horizon. Yet the constant electronic surveillance transformed this paradise into something more sinister, a beautiful prison where privacy was merely an illusion. The psychological weight of her situation pressed down on her shoulders. The sudden transition from her previous life to this bewildering display of wealth created a disorienting sense of displacement. She recognized the symptoms in herself, the subtle anxiety that crept through her veins, the nagging identity crisis as she struggled to reconcile who she had been with what she had become overnight. She was experiencing what some might call status shock, the profound psychological adjustment that comes with a dramatic shift in social standing. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Mr. Han's personal assistant, a petite woman with severe features and immaculate attire, entered without waiting for a response. Mrs. Han, she said, the title still sounding foreign to Song Si's ears. Dinner will be served at 8 in the main dining room. Mr. Han requests your presence. Her tone was clinical, devoid of warmth or curiosity about the woman who had suddenly appeared in her employer's home. Thank you, Song Si replied, her voice steadier than she expected. Will there be other guests? The assistant's expression revealed nothing. No, just you and Mr. Han. He prefers privacy for your first evening together. With that, she turned and left, her heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. Left alone as the servants dispersed to prepare her evening attire, Song Chi wandered to the window. The sprawling estate was surrounded by high walls and state-of-the-art security systems, a fortress designed not just to keep intruders out but to keep her in. Beyond those walls lay the life she had known, the career she had built as a respected designer before Zhang Jinghong had systematically dismantled it. Now she was here, reduced to human collateral in a business transaction between two powerful men. The concept of golden handcuffs took on a literal meaning in her situation. She was bound to this place not by choice, but by an arrangement that offered luxurious compensation for her lost freedom. Every amenity, every service, every beautiful object surrounding her served as a reminder of her captivity rather than her privilege. Like executives trapped in high-paying jobs they've grown to hate, she found herself imprisoned by comfort and security. As she prepared for dinner, servants returned to dress her in an evening gown that had been selected for her. The routine felt disturbingly reminiscent of a doll being prepared for display. While they arranged her hair, Song-Chi's eyes fell on an ornate jewelry box on her vanity, one she hadn't noticed earlier. Curiosity prompted her to open it when the servant stepped away momentarily. Inside, nestled among velvet compartments containing necklaces and rings worth small fortunes, she found a folded note. The handwriting was bold and decisive masculine. 3 words were written in what she assumed was Mr. Han's hand. Trust no one. The cryptic message sent a chill down her spine. What game was her new owner playing? Was this a warning or a test? The note contradicted everything about this arrangement, suggesting conspiracies and dangers lurking beneath the polished surface of her new life. Song-Chi carefully folded the note and tucked it into a hidden pocket sewn into her gown, known small secret she could keep in a house where her every move was monitored. A spark of defiance ignited within her, small but unmistakable. If survival in this gilded cage required understanding rules she hadn't agreed to, then she would become a quick study. She would observe, listen, and learn the invisible currents of power flowing through this mansion. The ornate clock on the mantel chimed, signaling it was time to make her way to dinner. Taking one final look at herself in the mirror, Song-Si straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Her reflection showed a woman adorned like royalty, but with eyes that had lost none of their intelligence or resolve despite recent trauma. The clock's chime faded as Song-Si descended the grand staircase, unaware that behind the eyes watching her approach lay emotions no business contract had accounted for. What happens when the person who purchased you looks at you with something other than ownership in their gaze? The dining room stretched before her like a battlefield, the polished mahogany table creating a vast expanse between them. Mr. Han stood as she entered, a gesture of respect that seemed incongruous with their arrangement. He waited until she was seated before resuming his place at the opposite end, a distance that made conversation feel like an international negotiation. The silence settled around them like a physical presence, as servants brought out the first course, their movements practiced and precise. Song-Si kept her eyes fixed on her plate, methodically taking small bites of food she couldn't taste. The weight of Mr. Han's gaze pressed against her, but she resisted looking up. What would she find in those eyes? The cold calculation of a businessman reviewing his latest acquisition? The entitled satisfaction of a man who had purchased another human being? She wasn't sure which would be worse. When she finally gathered her courage and lifted her gaze, what she found unsettled her more than any scenario she had imagined. Mr. Han wasn't staring at her with possession or evaluation. He was watching her with unmistakable curiosity, his head tilted slightly as if trying to solve a particularly fascinating puzzle. Their eyes met, and rather than looking away as a man with something to hide might do, he held her gaze with an unexpected warmth. "Do you play any instruments, Miss Song?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence with such an ordinary question that she nearly dropped her fork. "Piano," she answered cautiously. "Since childhood." He nodded as if her answer confirmed something. "And your education was in design, correct? With a focus on textiles and sustainable materials?" The precision of his knowledge startled her. These weren't details her husband would have shared in a business transaction. These were aspects of herself she had once been proud of, parts of her identity that had been systematically diminished during her marriage. "Yes," she said, studying his face for clues to his intent, "though I haven't practiced professionally for some time." Their conversation continued in this vein, with Mr. Han asking thoughtful questions about her interests, her opinions on art movements, her favorite cities for architectural inspiration. Not once did he mention the arrangement that had brought her here, nor did he make demands or assert authority. His approach created a confusing dynamic that contradicted everything she understood about her situation. This wasn't the interaction of owner and property, it felt disturbingly like genuine interest. When he passed her a serving dish, their fingers accidentally brushed. She noticed immediately how his hand trembled slightly at the contact, a moment of vulnerability from a man reputed to be ruthless in business and unflinching in negotiations. He withdrew quickly, covering the moment by asking about her preference for wine. But that brief physical reaction told her something important. Whatever game Mr. Han was playing, it wasn't one he had complete control over. Research suggests that genuine interest is often signaled through mirroring, her university psychology professor had once explained. Song-Si found herself observing Mr. Han's body language with new attention. Despite the distance between them, she noticed how he subtly shifted his posture to mirror hers when she leaned forward. His eye contact remained consistent without becoming predatory. These were not the closed-off postures or inconsistent expressions of someone engaged in pure manipulation. The sudden ring of a phone shattered the delicate atmosphere. Mr. Han glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened into something more recognizable, the face of the powerful CEO she had seen in business magazines. "Excuse me," he said, rising from the table. "I need to take this." Though he stepped into the adjacent room, the acoustics carried portions of his conversation clearly. "The arrangement is not open for renegotiation," she heard him say firmly. She recognized the name he spoke next, Jang Jing-hong, her husband. "The terms have changed," Mr. Han continued, his voice taking on an edge she hadn't heard directed at her. "That aspect is non-negotiable. I suggest you accept the current parameters." When he returned to the table, a new tension had settled in his shoulders. He studied her face for a moment before speaking. "Your husband appears to have misunderstood the nature of our arrangement." "And what is the nature of that arrangement, Mr. Han?" Song-si asked, surprising herself with her directness. "Because I'm finding it difficult to reconcile your behavior with the transaction I witnessed." He set down his glass slowly. "You have every reason to be suspicious. I know what I saw," she continued, emboldened by his acknowledgement. "My husband sold me to you as part of a business deal. Yet you sit here asking about my education and musical interests as if this were a normal dinner. Why would someone like you participate in such a degrading arrangement if you appear to respect me?" The question hung between them, a challenge that forced truth into the open. Mr. Han's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through his careful composure. "I first saw your work 3 years ago," he said after a long pause. "A collection displayed in the Songjiang Gallery. Innovative textiles with sustainable production methods that didn't sacrifice beauty for ethics." He met her eyes directly. "The collection was presented under your husband's name, but the artist's statement mentioned inspiration from traditional techniques you'd studied during your time in Suzhou." Song-si felt the blood drain from her face. That collection, her finest work, had been attributed to Jang Jing-hong after their marriage. He had claimed her designs as his own creation, using them to secure his position with international buyers. "How did you know?" she whispered. The inconsistency between his previous work and that collection was striking. "I made inquiries." Mr. Han's eyes held steady on hers. "By the time I discovered the truth, you had already disappeared from professional circles. Your husband became increasingly prominent while you became invisible. So this arrangement," she began. "When I heard Jang Jing-hong was desperate enough to offer you as collateral, I saw an opportunity to meet the actual artist. I accepted his terms to free you from his control." Han's expression darkened. "What I didn't anticipate was how he would present the arrangement to you, or that he would frame it as a sale rather than a strategic dissolution of your marriage." The revelation left Song-si speechless. The idea that her artwork had been the catalyst for this bizarre arrangement, that Mr. Han had recognized her talent when everyone else had forgotten, it created a disorienting shift in her understanding. "Why not simply tell me this from the beginning?" she demanded, not ready to trust this new narrative despite its appeal. "Would you have believed me?" he asked simply. "Or would you have assumed it was manipulation from a man who had just participated in your husband's scheme?" The honesty of his question disarmed her. She wouldn't have believed him, not immediately. Trust had been systematically destroyed during her marriage, replaced with constant vigilance and suspicion. As servers cleared the final course, Song-si found herself caught in the space between suspicion and hope. The dinner that should have confirmed her worst fears had instead introduced unsettling possibilities. Was Mr. Han another sophisticated predator, using her artistic ambitions to manipulate her? Or could he possibly be an unexpected ally in a world that had taken everything from her? Society's judgment arrives swiftly for women who step outside conventional boundaries, rarely waiting for truth to catch up with perception. The whispers began the moment Song-si entered the ballroom, on Mr. Han's arm, each glance and hushed conversation, declaring her a woman traded from one powerful man to another. Calculating, manipulative, precisely what everyone needed her to be. But what happens when the carefully edited story society believes contradicts the woman standing before them? The corporate gala glittered with extravagance, crystal chandeliers reflecting light across a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. Song-si felt every eye in the room track her movement as she walked beside Mr. Han, her simple but elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the ostentatious displays surrounding her. The weight of judgment felt heavier than any diamond necklace. Perhaps most unsettling was how quickly the narrative about her had formed, as if the entire room had received the same briefing on who she was supposed to be. "You must be the new acquisition," a silver-haired executive said with a smirk when Mr. Han stepped away briefly to speak with a business associate. The man didn't even attempt to disguise his assessment, eyes traveling from her face downward. "Han always did have excellent taste in art and women. Tell me, was it difficult to arrange your transfer of ownership?" Song-si's face remained perfectly composed, a skill she'd developed through years of navigating her former husband's business gatherings. "I'm afraid you've been misinformed about the nature of my relationship with Mr. Han," she replied with practiced calm, though her pulse quickened with indignation. "Perhaps you should direct your questions to him." As she moved through the room, the pattern repeated its thinly veiled innuendos and barely disguised contempt. A woman in a crimson dress examined her as one might inspect counterfeit goods. Two men exchanged knowing smiles when she passed. The undercurrent of conversation shifted whenever she approached, only to resume with greater intensity once she moved beyond earshot. Her moment of respite in the powder room proved short-lived when a woman with familiar features, Mr. Han's sister, as she soon introduced herself, cornered her against the marble countertop. "Let's skip the pretense," the woman said, voice low but sharp. "My brother may be blinded by whatever spell you've cast, but the rest of us can see exactly what you're doing. First my brother-in-law, now Han, you certainly know how to trade up, don't you?" The accusation struck Song-si like a physical blow. "Your brother-in-law? I don't understand." "Please," Mr. Han's sister scoffed. "Everyone knows about your affair with Jang Jing-hong's brother. Did you think we wouldn't hear how you manipulated both of them? And now, somehow, you've orchestrated this entire arrangement. I won't stand by while you use my brother as another stepping stone." Song-si felt her world tilt sideways. The rumor was not only false but bizarrely specific, an affair with a brother-in-law she'd met perhaps twice at family gatherings. The calculated nature of the lie revealed her former husband's hand in crafting this narrative. Jang Jing-hong had been busy ensuring she would find no allies in her new life. "I'm afraid Jang Jing-hong has been very creative with his storytelling," Song-si replied, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. "But I won't defend myself against accusations that have no basis in reality. Your brother knows the truth of our arrangement." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Men like my brother only know what women like you want them to know." When Song-si returned to the ballroom, she found Mr. Han engaged in conversation with three older men, clearly longtime business associates based on their familiar manner. Their discussion halted abruptly as she approached. Mr. Han introduced her with formal politeness, but the temperature of the conversation dropped noticeably. "Han has always had unconventional approaches to business," one of the men commented, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Though this latest acquisition is certainly his most creative." Another man leaned closer, lowering his voice, though clearly intending for Song-si to hear. "When you tire of your new toy, perhaps we could arrange something similar. My wife's assistant has been giving me trouble lately, might be worth a trade." The casual cruelty of the suggestion, the easy way they discussed women as exchangeable commodities, struck Song-si not with its novelty but its familiarity. This was the world she had inhabited at Jang Jing-hong's side, where women existed as decorative accessories or useful tools, never as fully realized human beings. Mr. Han's response surprised her. "I suggest you reconsider both your assumption and your tone," he said quietly, authority emanating from him without raising his voice. "Miss Song is my guest, not my possession." The arrangement with her former husband was a business dissolution, not a transfer of property. The men shifted uncomfortably, unused to being challenged in their boys' club mentality. The next morning brought fresh horrors. Security footage from the gala had somehow leaked onto social media, edited with surgical precision to create a damning narrative. Brief moments when Song-si smiled at various executives were spliced together, making her appear flirtatious and calculating. A second when Mr. Han's hand brushed her lower back was looped and slowed, transforming a moment of ordinary guidance into something suggestive. Comments exploded across platforms, analyzing her body language, her dress, her presumed motivations. Tabloid headlines screamed across her tablet screen. When she checked the news, CEO's new companion, power play or passion. Inside the high-stakes trade of Song-si. Sources reveal long-time affair before arrangement. Each article quoted anonymous insiders who painted her as a master manipulator who had orchestrated her own sale to climb the social ladder. The character assassination was both swift and comprehensive. In less than 24 hours, a complete narrative had been constructed and distributed, leaving no room for her voice or the truth. In high society, a woman's reputation could be completely destroyed by a single edited video, while the men who arranged her fate continued their business unscathed. Song-si set the tablet down, her hands surprisingly steady. She had expected judgment, but the coordinated nature of the attack suggested Jang Jing-hong wasn't merely spreading rumor, she was actively working to ensure she would be isolated and discredited in her new environment. When Mr. Han found her sitting in the garden later that morning, she surprised him with her request. "I need access to your design studio," she said without preamble, "and materials. I won't hide from this scandal by issuing denials or explanations no one will believe anyway." Mr. Han studied her with that same curious gaze she'd noticed during their first dinner. "You want to work? Now? I want to reclaim who I am," she answered simply. "These people have decided what kind of woman I must be. Nothing I say will change their minds. But my work-me designs, they speak with a voice no one can edit or distort. Something like admiration flickered across his features. The East Wing has a fully equipped studio. It's yours. Whatever materials you need can be arranged. 3 days later, he appeared at the studio door while she was working. Song-si had barely left the space, losing herself in the creative process that had once been her lifeline. Sketches covered every surface, fabric samples arranged in experimental combinations. "There's a design competition next month," he said, watching her hands move across a length of raw silk. "Anonymous submissions only, judged purely on merit. I've taken the liberty of preparing entry materials." Song-chi looked up, wariness still her default response to unexpected gestures. "Why would you do that?" "Because talent deserves recognition, regardless of the name attached to it," he replied simply. "Your work should speak for itself, free from the judgments currently attached to your name." Freedom to create without judgment was one thing, but freedom from the past required confronting the shadows. The night Song-chi lost consciousness at her husband's company party 3 years ago had been weaponized against her ever since. But what if everything she'd been told about her behavior that evening was an elaborate construction, designed to keep her trapped? 3 months had passed since Song-si began her new life at Mr. Han's estate. The design studio had become her sanctuary, a place where her creativity flowed unhindered for the first time in years. Yet even as her hands crafted beauty during daylight hours, her nights were increasingly haunted by fractured images that refused to coalesce into coherent memories. In her dreams, she found herself back at that company party, wearing a red dress she'd designed herself, holding a champagne flute as executives circled like sharks. Then darkness would swallow everything, leaving her with nothing but the sensation of falling. She awoke gasping from another such nightmare, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool air of her bedroom. The digital clock read 3:27 a.m. These episodes were becoming more frequent, as if her mind was desperately trying to recover something important that had been locked away. The pattern was always the same: flashes of that night, then a blank void where memories should exist, then waking with her heart racing and a lingering sense of violation she couldn't explain. "Your brain is protecting you," Mr. Han said the following evening when she finally mentioned the nightmares. They sat in his study, a space she'd never been invited into before. Unlike the calculated opulence of the rest of the mansion, this room felt genuinely personal, with its worn leather chairs and books showing actual signs of having been read. But sometimes protection becomes its own prison. "You know something?" Song-si said, her voice steadier than she felt. It wasn't a question. Mr. Han didn't answer immediately. Instead, he unlocked a drawer in his desk and removed a small external hard drive. "I've debated whether showing you this would help or harm, but you deserve the truth, however painful." The laptop screen flickered to life with security footage from what Song-chi recognized as the Jang Corporation headquarters, where the fateful party had been held. The timestamp showed 11:42 p.m. Her breath caught as she watched herself on screen, visibly disoriented, stumbling slightly as she exited what appeared to be Jang Jinghong's private office. Her husband emerged moments later, scanning the hallway before gripping her arm roughly. The Song-si in the footage appeared to be struggling to focus her eyes, her movements uncoordinated in a way that went beyond simple intoxication. "This footage was supposedly destroyed," Mr. Han said quietly. "It cost a considerable sum to recover it." "He always told me I'd embarrassed him," Song-si whispered, unable to tear her eyes from the screen as her husband half-dragged, half-carried her unconscious form toward a service elevator. "That I'd gotten drunk and made inappropriate advances toward his business partners. That I should be grateful he'd forgiven my shameful behavior." "He drugged you," Mr. Han stated flatly, "and then used your inability to remember against you. Classic gaslighting, making you question your own reality while substituting his narrative." The revelation sent an electric current through Song-si's body. For 3 years, she'd lived with crushing shame for actions she couldn't remember, had accepted her husband's constant reminders of how she'd failed him that night. The truth was simultaneously devastating and liberating, but it raised an even more disturbing question. "Why would he do this to me?" she asked, though even as the words left her lips, fragmented memories began surfacing, pieces of a puzzle her mind had been trying to reassemble. She remembered now, arriving early to the party, losing track of Jang Jinghong, deciding to leave a note in his office. The filing cabinet had been open, documents scattered across the desk that shouldn't have been there. Photographs of designs that looked remarkably similar to her own concepts, but with another company's logo. A recorded conversation playing on his computer that she wasn't meant to hear. "I think I saw something I wasn't supposed to see," she said slowly. "Something about designs being stolen." Mr. Han nodded. "Jang Jinghong has been engaged in corporate espionage for years. He's systematically stolen intellectual property from smaller design houses, driving several to bankruptcy, after they invested everything in innovations he then claimed as his own. I've been building a case against him, but could never find concrete evidence." She stared at him with new understanding. That's why you agreed to his arrangement. You thought I might have information. Initially, yes. Mr. Han admitted, his expression solemn. In the beginning, you were a potential key to bringing down a man who's destroyed many lives. But I never anticipated that I'd be completely unaware of what I'd seen. Song-si finished for him. Or that I would come to care about you beyond any strategic value, he added quietly. A fresh memory surfaced, her husband's rage when, months after the party, she'd questioned why a particular textile design in his new collection looked so similar to work from a small studio that had recently closed. He'd accused her of jealousy and ingratitude, reminding her of her behavior at the party as proof of her instability. He used my own designs, she realized aloud. He would present my work to secure contracts, then replace them with cheaper alternatives during production. The clients would blame the designers for failing to deliver what was promised, not realizing the switch. While he pocketed the difference in production costs, Mr. Han confirmed, your husband built his reputation on destroying others, including you. When I saw your work attributed to him at the Songjiang Gallery, I knew something was wrong. The artistry was inconsistent with his previous collections. Song-si felt a complex wave of emotions wash over her. Rage at the years stolen from her, vindication that her instincts had been correct, and a wrenching grief for the person she had been before that night. Her husband had systematically dismantled her confidence, using a manufactured incident to keep her compliant and ashamed. Each time she'd questioned him, he'd weaponized her memory gaps against her, creating a perfect psychological cage. Why would he sell me to you, if I know something that could destroy him? Because he believes the drugs were effective in erasing your memory completely. And because I convinced him I wanted you for entirely different reasons. Mr. Han's expression darkened slightly. He thought he was manipulating me. He never considered I might have an agenda beyond the obvious. Song-chi stood and paced the room, her mind racing with implications. You've been using me as bait in your vendetta against my husband. At first, he acknowledged without hesitation. But that changed when I came to know you. Your resilience, your talent, your integrity, despite everything done to you. She turned to face him, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. Not as her owner or savior, but as a man with his own complex motivations who had, against all expectations, begun to respect her as an equal. Help me remember everything, she said decisively. If what you're saying is true, I need to recover every detail of what I saw that night. For the next several hours, they worked together, Mr. Han sharing his years of investigation while Song-si methodically pieced together her fragmented memories. With each recovered detail, her anger transformed into something more powerful, a determination to reclaim not just her designs and reputation, but her agency. We'll need more than my recovered memories to prove what he's done, she said finally, studying the timeline they'd created across Mr. Han's desk. We have more, he replied. Your sister-in-law has been documenting his activities for years, though she's been too afraid to come forward alone. With your testimony and the physical evidence I've gathered, we can build an irrefutable case. Song-chi nodded, her posture straightening as a sense of purpose replaced the confusion that had defined her for so long. Then let's finish this. The line between protection and possession often blurs when power dynamics are unequal. As Song-si stood by the window of Mr. Han's office, watching the city below through tempered glass that filtered the harshness of reality, she wondered if she had simply exchanged one cage for another. The bars might be invisible, the keeper kinder, but was she truly any more free than before? With newfound determination burning in her eyes, Song-si was prepared to face her husband, but when power declares war, it rarely sends a formal invitation. The following morning, Jang Jinghong appeared unannounced in Mr. Han's corporate lobby, his smile as sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. The receptionist's voice trembled slightly as she called up to Mr. Han's office, informing him of the unexpected visitor demanding to see Song-si immediately. He says if he's denied, there will be consequences, the receptionist explained, her eyes darting nervously toward the man whose reputation for vindictiveness preceded him. Song-si felt her body tense, old reflexes preparing her to submit, to minimize damage, to survive. But before she could speak, Mr. Han's voice cut through the room with surprising gentleness. Ask Ms. Song what she wishes to do, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. This decision belongs to her alone. The weight of choice so long denied her settled heavily on Song-chi's shoulders. She took a steadying breath before responding. I don't wish to see him. What happened next shocked even the most seasoned executives. Instead of a quiet refusal delivered through intermediaries, Mr. Han walked directly to the lobby, where security personnel had already formed a subtle perimeter around Jang Jinghong. The corporate atrium fell silent as Mr. Han addressed his business rival with glacial composure. Ms. Song has declined your request, he stated, loudly enough for the gathered employees and visitors to hear. Furthermore, I am making it known publicly that any attempt to contact, coerce, or harm her in any way will be considered a direct attack against me personally. Jang Jinghong's practiced smile faltered only slightly. You're making a grave mistake mixing business with pleasure, Han. I have photographs that might interest your board of directors. Release whatever you wish, Mr. Han interrupted, his voice unwavering. But understand that your threats have just cost you our distribution contract. The gasps from nearby executives were audible. The contract in question represented nearly 30% of Jiang Jinghong's company's annual revenue. Mr. Han had just announced a decision that would send ripples through the market before trading even opened the next day. And he had done it without hesitation, without consultation, without the analysis and risk assessment that typically preceded his business decisions. It was perhaps the first truly impulsive act of his carefully constructed career. Songsi watched from above as her former husband's face contorted with rage before he composed himself and stalked out, already barking orders into his phone. The protective barrier Mr. Han had just erected around her was both comforting and confusing. No one had ever prioritized her safety over profit, certainly not the man who had treated her as a commodity to be traded. The following day brought the inevitable fallout. Songsi sat silently in Mr. Han's office as his board members filed in, their expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed anger. The emergency meeting had been called after Jiang Jinghong's stock plummeted 27% in morning trading, triggering market reactions that affected multiple connected industries. Your personal feelings have compromised your business judgment, one silver-haired director stated bluntly. This decision should have been brought before the board. Another added, we understand your attachment to Ms. Song, but ethical concerns must be balanced against shareholder interests. Song Si felt herself shrinking under their scrutiny, becoming the object rather than the subject of the conversation, a familiar, painful position. But Mr. Han remained unnervingly calm, his fingers steepled before him as he listened to each concern. I appreciate your perspectives, he finally said. However, I made this decision as both CEO and majority shareholder. If you wish to challenge my leadership on these grounds, you are welcome to call for a vote of confidence. The room fell silent. No one moved to take up his offer. When the directors had filed out, Songsi turned to him, confusion evident in her expression. Why would you risk everything like that? Your reputation, your company. Because some principles matter more than profit margins, he answered simply. Their conversation was cut short when Mr. Han's assistant burst in with news that Jiang Jinghong had indeed released the threatened photograph sheevily edited images suggesting impropriety between Song Si and various business associates long before her arrangement with Mr. Han. Song Si felt the familiar cold wash of shame, regardless of the fabrication. Public humiliation had been Jiang Jinghong's most effective weapon throughout their marriage, isolation through disgrace, control through degradation. But before the sick feeling could fully take hold, Mr. Han's response team sprang into action with surprising efficiency. His legal department filed immediate defamation suits, while his public relations team issued statements supporting Song Si's character and integrity. Forensic digital analysts were retained to prove the manipulation of the images. The swift defense left Song Chi breathless and unexpectedly angry. I don't need you to fight my battles, she said that evening, the words erupting after hours of silence. I'm not a damsel you purchased to rescue. The words hung between them, sharp and honest. Mr. Han set down his teacup carefully. Is that what you believe? That I see you as an investment to protect, isn't it? You buy me from one man only to shield me from him? What's the difference beyond method? Song Si demanded, finding strength in her own voice. Protection can be another form of control. Mr. Han considered her words with unexpected thoughtfulness. You're right, he said finally. Protection without agency is just another cage. He crossed to his desk and retrieved a folder, placing it before her. Inside were legal documents transferring ownership of her design patents back to her name, along with banking information for an account containing the proceeds from her work over the years funds Jiang Jinghong had diverted to himself. I had my team recover what was rightfully yours, Mr. Han explained. This account is in your name only. I have no access to it. Song Si stared at the papers, their significance slowly dawning on her. This is enough for me to leave, if that's what you choose, he finished quietly. I won't keep you here against your will, Song Si. That was never my intention. The realization washed over her like a wave. Mr. Han wasn't protecting his property. He was defending her dignity and restoring her freedom. The distinction was profound. For the first time, someone in a position of power over her had willingly relinquished that power, placing choice back in her hands. In that moment, something fundamental shifted between them. The man before her transformed from rescuer to something far more rare, a partner who respected her enough to risk losing her entirely. Just as Song Si began to taste genuine freedom for the first time in years, an elegant cream envelope arrived at Mr. Han's office. The thick, expensive paper bore the unmistakable wax seal of her former in-law's estate, a golden chrysanthemum that once represented family pride but now seemed more like a warning. Inside, alongside a formal invitation to a family gathering, was a hastily scribbled note from her sister-in-law. They've been lying to you. Come alone. Evidence waiting. Song-si stared at the note, her fingers tracing the desperate pressure of the pen strokes. The invitation itself was clearly a trap, yet the urgency in those 5 words made her pulse quicken. When she showed it to Mr. Han that evening, his reaction was immediate and unequivocal. "You can't seriously be considering this," he said, his voice tight with concern. "These people have orchestrated your suffering for years. Walking into their home voluntarily is exactly what they want." He paced the length of his study, the invitation held between his fingers as if it might bite. "I need to know why," Song-si replied quietly. "Not just what Zhang Jinghong did, but why an entire family participated in my destruction. And if his sister is finally willing to talk." She let the implication hang in the air between them. Mr. Han's expression softened. "Then let me come with you. Or at least let me send security with you." Song-chi shook her head. "If I arrive with an entourage, I'll never get the truth. Some demons you have to face alone." She saw the conflict in his eyes, the desire to protect her warring with his respect for her autonomy. It was this respect, so different from the control she'd known before, that strengthened her resolve. 3 days later, Song-si walked through the imposing gates of the Zhang family estate. The familiar scent of osmanthus flowers brought unwelcome memories, flooding back family dinners where she sat in silence while her achievements were attributed to her husband, social events where she was displayed like a trophy, and then dismissed. The house itself, with its traditional architecture and meticulous gardens, projected an image of prosperity and harmony that Song-chi now recognized as entirely fabricated. Her sister-in-law, Min, greeted her in the garden pavilion, away from the main house. Once immaculately polished, Min now had shadows under her eyes and a nervous energy that made her check over her shoulder every few seconds. "They don't know I contacted you," Min whispered, leading Song-si to a secluded corner. "But it's time someone in this family told the truth, even if it destroys us, which it might." She produced a small external hard drive from her handbag. "Everything is here: financial records, correspondence, evidence of what my brother has done to you and others before you." Song-si took the drive, her hand steady despite the weight of what it represented. "Why now, Min? You watched it all happen." Min's face contorted with shame. "Because I was a coward. Because I believed protecting the family name was worth any price, until I saw the price was other women's lives." She glanced toward the house. "My brother has a pattern. You weren't the first talented woman he attached himself to, took credit for, and then discarded when they threatened to expose him. Our family helped hide each instance, convinced the family reputation mattered more than individual justice." Song-si felt ice spreading through her veins. "How many?" "4 that I know of. But you're the only one he actually married. The others were collaborators, business partners. When they became too vocal about credit for their work, they were systematically discredited. Professional sabotage, planted evidence, manipulated photographs, whatever it took. A family gathering that Song-si had expected to be filled with thinly veiled hostility had instead transformed into something far more sinister, a rare glimpse behind the curtain of a dynasty built on exploitation. Min guided her toward the main house, explaining in hushed tones how appearances had become the family's religion, with actual financial ruin lurking just beneath the polished surface. "The family business is effectively bankrupt," Min confessed as they entered the grand foyer. "Has been for nearly 2 years. The mansions, the cars, the art collections, it's all leveraged against loans that can't be repaid. My father over-leveraged everything on bad investments, and Zhang Jinghong promised to save us all with his deal with Mr. Han. A deal contingent on me." Song-chi finished, the final piece clicking into place. The transaction wasn't just about humiliating Harriet, was about financial survival for an entire family desperate to maintain their facade of success. The most devastating revelation came in the family's private study, where Min unlocked a cabinet containing medical vials and handwritten notes. "Mother helped him that night," she said, her voice barely audible. "When you discovered those documents about the stolen designs, she prepared the sedative herself. She has a background in pharmacy. She told herself it was to protect the family legacy, that one night of your confusion was worth saving generations of our name." Song-si stared at the evidence of such intimate betrayal. Her own mother-in-law had actively participated in drugging her, creating the very vulnerability that had been used against her for years. The systematic nature of the deception revealed a family structure built entirely around protecting toxic behavior, where every member played their assigned role in maintaining the lie. "Min, what are you doing?" The sharp voice cut through the room like a blade. Zhang Jinghong stood in the doorway, his handsome features arranged in what once might have passed for concern but now revealed itself as barely contained rage. "Song-si, what an unexpected pleasure. I see my sister has been entertaining you." "I'm showing her the truth, brother," Min replied, straightening her shoulders despite the tremor in her voice. "Someone in this family needs to finally show some integrity." His charming public persona evaporated instantly. "You stupid, ungrateful woman," he hissed, advancing toward them both. "After everything this family has done for you, After every sacrifice we've made to maintain our position, his hand shot out, grabbing Min's wrist with enough force to make her gasp. The only sacrifice this family has made is its humanity, Song-chi said, stepping between them. And for what? To protect a man who's built his entire career stealing from women he systematically destroys? The mask dropped completely then. Jang Jing-hong's face contorted into something unrecognizable, the glimpse of the true person hiding behind years of calculated charm. You think you've won because you caught the attention of a man more powerful than me? You're still just a transaction, Song-si. A pretty object passed from one man to another. I'm no one's object, Song-si replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. And neither is your sister. Neither were any of the women whose work you stole. His hand moved so quickly she barely saw it coming, but before it could connect with her face, another hand intercepted it. 2 security personnel in plain clothes had appeared in the doorway, their expressions professional but their grips uncompromising as they restrained Jang Jing-hong. Mr. Han thought you might need assistance after all, Miss Song, one of them said quietly. He respects your decision to face this alone, but wanted to ensure your safety. As they escorted her and Min from the house, hard drive and evidence secured, Song-si felt something unfamiliar expanding in her chest. Not relief, exactly, but a profound realization that she had faced the architects of her pain and remained standing. The family that had once seemed so powerful, so untouchable in their unified front of respectability, had revealed themselves as desperately clinging to an image that no longer existed. The illusion of the perfect family had crumbled behind closed doors. But Jang Jing-hong wasn't ready to lose face publicly. As dawn broke the next morning, he stood before a sea of cameras, his expression a masterpiece of manufactured grief. My wife has betrayed me in ways I never thought possible, he announced, voice cracking with practiced precision. And just like that, Song-si's private nightmare transformed into a public spectacle where she'd have to fight not just for justice, but for her very identity. Mr. Han watched the broadcast from his office, jaw tightening as Jang Jing-hong wove a compelling narrative of a devoted husband blindsided by his wife's calculated infidelity and ambition. The press ate it up, the scorned husband, the predatory business rival, the scheming wife. It was a story as old as time, requiring no proof beyond the tears of a man who had perfected the art of public performance. He's declaring war, Mr. Han said quietly, switching off the screen as Song-si entered the room. She nodded, her face expressionless. She had expected this, had known Jang Jing-hong would never allow her to simply walk away with evidence of his crimes. What surprised her was how many people readily believed him without question. Within hours, hashtags demanding justice for Jang Jing-hong flooded social media. Anonymous accounts shared fabricated stories about Song-chi's past, inventing scandalous details with each retelling. Complete strangers dissected her character, her motives, her body language in photographs. The court of public opinion required no evidence, no due process, only a compelling villain, and Song-chi had been cast in that role. Meanwhile, Mr. Han's company became collateral damage. Competitors who had long envied his success seized the opportunity, contacting his business partners with concerns about the stability of his leadership. By midweek, his stock had dropped 15%. 3 major partners had requested emergency meetings to reevaluate their positions. The board was growing restless, with whispers of an emergency vote of confidence circulating among senior leadership. You shouldn't have to pay this price for helping me, Song-si said, watching Mr. Han end yet another tense call with investors. He looked up, genuinely surprised. Is that what you think this is? A price I'm paying? Song-chi, for the first time in my life, I'm making decisions based on what's right rather than what's profitable. That's not a sacrifice, it's a liberation. The tide began to shift unexpectedly on Thursday morning. A woman named Mei Lin, former executive assistant to Jang Jing-hong, contacted major news outlets with her story. For 3 years, she had documented her boss's exploitation of female designers, his fraudulent business practices, and the psychological manipulation he employed to maintain control. She provided emails, voice recordings, and witness testimony that corroborated Song-si's account in stunning detail. I couldn't stay silent any longer, Mei Lin told reporters. When I saw him standing there, pretending to be the victim while describing exactly what he himself had done to others, I knew I had to come forward, regardless of personal cost. The revelation created the first cracks in Jang Jing-hong's carefully constructed facade. His PR team scrambled to discredit Mei Lin, calling her a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge. But the evidence she provided was too specific, too damning to dismiss entirely. For the first time, public sentiment wavered, uncertainty replacing the previous certainty about Song-si's guilt. Then came the second blow. Min, Song-si's sister-in-law, scheduled her own press conference. With trembling hands but unwavering voice, she publicly severed ties with her family and released financial records showing years of embezzlement by her brother. Our family business wasn't failing because of market forces, she revealed. It was failing because my brother systematically siphoned funds into offshore accounts, leaving our employees and shareholders to bear the consequences of his greed. The financial evidence was devastating, not just proving his theft from the family business, but revealing a pattern of exploitation that extended to every relationship in his life. Suppliers, partners, employees, all had been deceived and manipulated for his personal gain. Jiang Jinghong, sensing his narrative slipping away, made one final, desperate attempt to regain control. Without warning, he released video footage from 3 years earlier, heavily edited to show Songxi apparently stealing company documents. The implication was clear. She had been engaged in corporate espionage all along, making her the true villain of this story. For 24 agonizing hours, the edited video dominated news cycles. Commentators debated Songxi's guilt, questioning why she would need to steal if she wasn't hiding something. Just as the tide of public opinion began to turn against her once more, Mr. Han called an emergency press conference. Without preamble or explanation, he played the unedited footage. The complete video showed Songxi accidentally discovering documents while searching for her own design portfolio. It captured her confusion upon finding evidence of fraud, followed by Jiang Jinghong entering the room. Most damning of all, it clearly showed him slipping something into her drink when she turned away, followed by her rapid disorientation as the drug took effect. The silence that followed the video was deafening. Reporters who had been eager to crucify Songxi just days before now sat stunned, confronted with irrefutable evidence of the truth they had ignored in favor of a more sensational narrative. Through it all, Songxi remained largely silent, watching as strangers argued about her life, her character, her truth. She declined all interview requests, all opportunities to defend herself. She knew from bitter experience that a woman's defense is often perceived as confirmation of guilt, that the more passionately she protested her innocence, the more her emotions would be used against her. Instead, she made one carefully considered move. She contacted a respected journalist known for her integrity and agreed to a single interview, not to defend herself or attack Jiang Jinghong, but to address something more fundamental. "I'm not interested in being cast as either victim or villain," she began, her voice steady. "What happened to me is not unique. It's the product of systems that enable powerful men to silence women through social, financial, and psychological means. The question isn't whether you believe me or my former husband. The question is why our society makes it so easy for manipulation and abuse to flourish behind closed doors, and why we're so quick to judge women who find themselves caught in these situations." She spoke not of personal grievances but of structural problems. How the legal system, corporate culture, and social expectations create perfect conditions for exploitation. She discussed how women are conditioned to doubt their own perceptions, to minimize harm done to them, to prioritize others' comfort over their own safety. "This was never just about clearing my name," she concluded. "It's about challenging a system that presumes women are liars until proven truthful, while giving men the benefit of every doubt. My hope is that by sharing my experience, other women might recognize patterns in their own lives before they become trapped as I was." Her words resonated in ways that accusations and defenses never could have. Women recognized their own experiences in her story. Men with daughters and sisters found themselves reconsidering interactions they had previously dismissed. The conversation shifted from the salacious details of one couple's drama to the broader implications of power imbalances in relationships and workplaces. As for Jiang Jinghong, his desperate attempts to reclaim his narrative grew increasingly erratic and transparent. Without Min's support or the family's unified front, his credibility crumbled. Former business associates, sensing his weakness, began distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with the growing scandal. Investigations into his business practices gained momentum as additional victims found courage to come forward. As Jiang Jinghong's web of deception unraveled thread by thread in the public eye, a more intimate question haunted Songxi in private moments. How could she know her own heart when she'd never truly belonged to herself? The safety of Mr. Han's world had become both sanctuary and gilded cage. One she would need the courage to leave if she ever hoped to discover who she might become without a man defining her existence. The legal proceedings against her former husband brought a strange mix of vindication and emptiness. Standing in the spacious bedroom that had never truly felt like hers, Songxi traced her fingers along the expensive furnishings that surrounded her. Freedom, she realized, wasn't merely about escaping Jiang Jinghong's control. It was about defining herself on her own terms. Despite the growing warmth between her and Mr. Han, the foundation of their relationship remained rooted in a transaction she never chose. "I need to leave," she said simply when she found Mr. Han in his study that evening. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither could fully articulate. She watched his expression shift subtly: surprise, understanding, and beneath it all, a quiet devastation he couldn't entirely conceal. "I understand," he replied after a long moment, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "The account is already in your name. Use it however you need to." No arguments, no attempts to convince her otherwise, just acceptance that confirmed what she'd begun to believe about this complex man who had entered her life through such troubling circumstances. Within a week, Song-si secured a modest apartment across the city. Nothing like the opulence she was leaving behind, but wholly hers. The psychological impact of physical separation proved powerful, as studies had shown. Each decision, from selecting furniture to organizing her workspace, represented an act of reclamation. No longer navigating spaces designed by others, she created an environment that reflected her emerging sense of self. Establishing her independent design studio became her focus, channeling the creative energy that had been suppressed for years. The walls displayed her sketches and material samples, concrete evidence of her talent separate from the men who had attempted to claim it. While her work gained attention, Song-si found equal significance in mundane freedoms, preparing meals when she was hungry rather than when expected, sleeping when tired instead of adhering to someone else's schedule, making decisions without considering a man's approval. Mr. Han maintained a respectful distance, neither pressuring her nor abandoning her entirely. His legal team continued pursuing justice against Jang Jing-hong, but all communication came through intermediaries, giving Song-si the space to breathe and think without his influence. This absence became its own presence in her life, the consideration behind it speaking volumes about his feelings. On particularly quiet evenings, doubt would creep in. Was she rejecting something genuine out of fear? Had trauma made her incapable of recognizing sincere care? She would sit at her work table, sketching furiously as if the lines might provide answers the universe withheld. These moments of uncertainty were natural, she reminded herself, part of the process of establishing a separate identity after experiencing control for so long. 3 months into her independence, a prestigious fashion house contacted her about her portfolio. "Your designs demonstrate exceptional vision," the creative director told her during their first meeting. "We'd like to bring you to Paris to develop a collection under our label." The opportunity was everything she'd once dreamed of: international recognition for her work and a chance to build a career far from shadows of her past. That evening, she stood on her small balcony overlooking the city lights, considering what this opportunity represented. Paris meant distance, not just from painful memories of Jang Jing-hong, but also from whatever undefined possibility existed with Mr. Han. Was she ready to close that chapter before fully understanding what it might contain? The next morning, a simple envelope arrived by courier. Inside was a single handwritten note in Mr. Han's distinctive script. "Some people find each other at the wrong time, but for the right reasons." No pressure, no manipulation, no attempt to influence her decision. Just an acknowledgement of their complicated timing and a reminder that timing doesn't necessarily negate purpose. Song-si found herself unexpectedly moved by this gesture. Throughout their entangled history, Mr. Han had consistently demonstrated something her former husband never had: respect for her autonomy. Even now, facing her potential departure, he made no claims on her future. Instead, he offered understanding without expectation, perhaps the purest expression of care she had experienced. The process of forming healthy relationships after abusive experiences required deliberate rebuilding of trust. Song-chi recognized that their relationship had begun under highly unusual circumstances, marked initially by manipulation and control. The path to anything genuine between them would necessitate addressing these power imbalances directly. While preparing her portfolio for the Paris opportunity, Song-si realized something fundamental about freedom. True liberation wasn't about physical distance or rejection of connection. It was about having the power to make choices based on authentic desire rather than fear or obligation. For years, her decisions had been reactions to Jang Jing-hong's control. Even leaving Mr. Han's home had been, in part, a response to her past rather than a pure expression of her wants. What did she actually want? The question felt revolutionary. No one had asked her this in years, including herself. Establishing physical and professional independence had been crucial first steps in her healing journey, creating space where she could hear her own thoughts without interference. Her design studio and growing professional recognition provided concrete evidence that she could define her worth through her own talents. The Paris offer presented a significant opportunity to further establish her separate identity and create a life entirely of her own making. It represented not just career advancement but the chance to distance herself physically from the complex emotions and memories that surrounded her relationship with Mr. Han. Yet something held her back from immediately accepting. After a week of contemplation, Song-si made a decision that felt truly her own. She contacted Mr. Han directly, their first communication in months, and arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe where they had never been together. This meeting would be different from all their previous interactions. She would meet him neither as his property nor as his protégé, but as his equal. When she arrived, she found him already seated, his usually impeccable appearance slightly softened. A certain vulnerability showed in his eyes when he saw her, hope carefully restrained, questions he wasn't presuming to ask. For perhaps the first time, they faced each other without the weight of their arrangement as the primary context of their relationship. The corporate world never prepared Mr. Han for choosing between the empire he'd spent 15 years building and the woman who had unexpectedly captured his heart. As the early morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, he stared at the catastrophic financial projections displayed on his tablet numbers that spelled potential ruin. Zhang Jinghong, in one final vindictive strike, had leaked proprietary algorithms and confidential client information to his competitors. The damage was spreading through Mr. Han's holdings like wildfire, threatening to consume everything he'd built. The timing wasn't coincidental. With Song Qi's fashion debut less than 24 hours away, Zhang Jinghong had calculated his revenge, perfectly forcing a brutal choice between personal happiness and professional survival. Mr. Han's phone buzzed relentlessly, with calls from board members demanding an emergency meeting. The market hadn't even opened, yet pre-trading indicators suggested a bloodbath awaited. "Sir, the board is assembled in the conference room," his chief of staff announced from the doorway, his usually composed demeanor betraying obvious tension. "They're requesting your immediate presence." Mr. Han straightened his tie and grabbed his jacket. The walk to the conference room felt unusually long, each step weighted with the knowledge that his professional legacy hung in the balance. When he entered, 13 faces turned toward him, with expressions ranging from panic to accusation to grim resignation. "The numbers speak for themselves," the CFO began without preamble, gesturing toward the projection screen where red indicators dominated every chart. "We're looking at a 35% drop in value before trading even begins. If this continues through the week, we risk triggering default clauses with our major creditors." Mr. Han listened as his executive team outlined the damage in excruciating detail. The leak had been masterfully executed, targeting the very foundations of their competitive advantage. The board's proposed solution was equally straightforward. Distance the company from the source of the controversy. Distance the company from Song Ci. "We've prepared a press statement," the head of public relations said, sliding a document across the table. "It expresses regret over personal entanglements that compromised business judgment and announces your temporary step back from day-to-day operations while we stabilize the situation." The document contained carefully crafted language that effectively threw Song Ci under the bus, implying she had manipulated her way into Mr. Han's life and clouded his legendary business acumen. The statement promised a return to the company's core values, implicitly suggesting those values excluded personal relationships that jeopardized shareholder interests. "This statement goes out at noon," the PR director continued. "We've arranged a private interview with Financial Times where you can express personal regret while emphasizing your commitment to rebuilding stakeholder trust. Our analysis indicates we can stem the bleeding by 60% if we move quickly and decisively." Mr. Han read the statement twice, his expression unreadable. The conference room fell silent as everyone awaited his response. In that silence, a memory surfaced: Song Ci standing in his design studio for the first time, her eyes lighting up as she touched the fabrics with reverent fingers, coming alive in a way he'd never witnessed before. He remembered the precise moment she had looked up at him, surprised to find genuine respect in his eyes, rather than the ownership she'd expected. Across the city, Song Ci received a call from a former colleague now working at a financial news outlet. The woman's voice was sympathetic but direct as she explained the rumors circulating through business circles. Mr. Han was preparing to sacrifice their relationship to save his company. The board had apparently presented him with irrefutable evidence that maintaining any connection to the Song Ci situation would result in catastrophic financial losses. "I thought you should hear it from someone who cares about you," her colleague said gently. "The announcement is scheduled for noon." "I'm so sorry, Sai." Song Ci thanked her for the warning and ended the call, a familiar numbness spreading through her chest. She had been foolish to believe that anyone, even Mr. Han, would choose her over billions in market capitalization and a lifetime of achievement. Her gaze fell on the collection she would debut that evening, each piece representing her reclaimed identity and talent. At least she would have this, she thought. At least she would have her work. When noon arrived, Song Ci found herself unable to resist watching the live stream of Mr. Han's press conference. Better to face the betrayal directly than wait for second-hand accounts. She braced herself as he approached the podium, his expression grave but determined. Instead of the expected PR team, only his longtime deputy stood beside him. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Mr. Han began, his voice steady. "As many of you have heard, our company is facing significant challenges following a targeted corporate attack. I called this press conference to address these challenges directly and announce several important decisions." Song Ci held her breath, waiting for the inevitable disavowal. First, I want to make something absolutely clear. The relationship between myself and Song Si is not open for negotiation or sacrifice. Any attempts to leverage that relationship against either of us will be met with the full legal and financial resources at my disposal. A murmur rippled through the assembled press corps. This was not the statement they had expected. Second, I am announcing a restructuring of leadership within my company. Effective immediately, I am transferring operational control to my trusted deputy and longtime colleague, Lee Min-ho, while maintaining majority ownership. This transition has been in planning for some time and allows me to focus on strategic initiatives while the company continues under exemplary leadership. The cameras flashed frantically as reporters tried to process this unprecedented announcement. Mr. Han continued, his composure unwavering. Third, I want to address the psychology behind today's attack on our company. When powerful individuals choose love over conventional business priorities, it challenges fundamental assumptions about what drives success. Some view it as romantic, others call it foolish. I call it the most clear-headed decision of my career. He paused, his gaze finding the camera directly. Song Si, if you're watching, I want you to know that no company, no amount of wealth, no position or power could ever be worth sacrificing what we found. Your fashion debut tonight represents not just your exceptional talent, but your extraordinary courage. I hope to be there to witness it, but that choice, like all choices from this point forward, belongs entirely to you. The business world erupted in shock. Financial analysts scrambled to predict the implications of a notoriously ruthless CEO effectively choosing a personal relationship over his corporate identity. Social media exploded with competing narratives, some celebrating a rare victory of humanity over capitalism, others decrying a foolish surrender of shareholder value for sentiment. In her apartment, Song Si sat frozen, the tablet slipping from her fingers. No one in her life had ever chosen her over their own interests, not her family, not her former husband, not a single person until this moment. The realization broke through years of carefully constructed defenses, tears flowing freely down her face. Hours later, as she prepared backstage for her debut show, Song Si made a decision of her own. The collection had been designed as her personal statement of independence, each piece representing an aspect of her reclaimed identity. But as she reviewed the final lineup, she realized something was missing. With less than 30 minutes before showtime, she quickly sketched an additional piece, a stunning men's jacket that complemented her final gown, featuring subtle elements that echoed her signature style while standing distinct. She handed the sketch to her assistant with urgent instructions. Find Mr. Han. If he's here, ask if he would be willing to wear this for the final walk. If he's not, she paused, heart racing. Find him anyway. When the lights dimmed in the venue and the music signaled the show's conclusion, Song Si emerged in her finale piece, a breathtaking gown that seemed to capture both vulnerability and strength in its flowing lines and structured elements. The audience applauded enthusiastically, but fell silent in surprise as she extended her hand toward the side of the runway. Mr. Han stepped forward, wearing the hastily created jacket that marked him unmistakably as part of her vision, part of her story. As they walked the runway together, the audience witnessed not a business arrangement, not a scandal, but two people who had found each other through the most unlikely circumstances and chosen each other despite every reason not to. When the cameras stopped flashing and the applause faded that night, a question lingered in the air between them. Can a relationship born from such darkness ever truly step into the light? Behind the glamour of Song Si's fashion triumph lay two people facing their most daunting challenge yet, building something authentic from beginnings so deeply tainted by exploitation. Song Si found Mr. Han waiting quietly backstage after her models had dispersed, makeup artists had packed their kits, and the industry reporters had filed their initial reviews. He stood not as the corporate titan who had once held legal ownership of her life, but as a man with uncertainty in his eyes. The jacket she'd designed for him hung perfectly on his frame, the physical embodiment of their complicated connection. "I'd like to ask you something," he said, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "Would you consider having dinner with me? Not as Mr. Han and Song Chi from the arrangement, but as two people meeting for the first time." The request hung between them, deceptively simple yet impossibly complex. Creating something healthy required first acknowledging the trauma that brought them together, not pretending it never happened. Song Si understood that rebuilding from exploitation demanded more than romantic gestures. It required a conscious commitment to address lingering wounds, while fostering equality within their relationship. "I'm not sure what we're supposed to be to each other now," she admitted, her fingers absently tracing the beadwork on her gown. "But I'd like to find out, on new terms." Their first proper date took place at a quiet restaurant where neither of them held any business connections. No mansion staff hovered nearby, no security personnel maintained a watchful perimeter. Just two people sharing a meal, carefully navigating the delicate process of getting to know each other without the power dynamics that had defined their previous interactions. "I've spent years perfecting the art of control," Mr. Han confessed over dessert, revealing vulnerabilities she'd never witnessed during their months living under the same roof. My father built his business through manipulation and exploitation. I promised myself I'd build something different, but somehow found myself replicating his patterns without realizing it. Song-si recognized his revelation for what it was, not an excuse for the arrangement, but context for understanding the man sitting across from her. Creating space for this vulnerability became an essential part of dismantling the hierarchy between them. The fragile beginnings of their redefined relationship faced immediate external challenges. Zhang Jinghong, despite mounting criminal charges for fraud and financial manipulation, continued waging a public relations war against them both. Every court date brought fresh allegations and subtle threats, attempts to paint their evolving relationship as evidence of a long-running conspiracy. "He's trying to make us question ourselves," Song-si observed after particularly vicious allegations surfaced online. "To make me doubt what I know to be true about my own experiences." Establishing clear boundaries became their foundation for building trust. They agreed to communicate openly about their feelings and needs, ensuring both felt empowered and heard. Mr. Han suggested they maintain separate residences for the foreseeable future, a decision that initially surprised Song-si until she recognized it as his commitment to honoring her independence. "I want you to choose me each time," he explained, "not feel obligated by proximity or financial entanglement." For Song-si, navigating this evolving relationship meant confronting her deepest fears about her own judgment. She had fallen into Zhang Jinghong's manipulation before, trusting where she shouldn't have. Now she questioned her ability to recognize genuine care versus another sophisticated form of control. "Sometimes I look at you and wonder if I'm making another terrible mistake," she admitted during a difficult conversation 3 months into their new beginning. "How do I trust myself after everything that happened?" "By making choices that protect your autonomy," he answered. "And by allowing yourself to recognize when someone consistently respects your boundaries rather than challenging them." Their approach to rebuilding trust focused on demonstrating reliability through consistent actions rather than grand declarations. When Mr. Han said he would call, he did. When he promised to respect her creative independence, he refused to interfere, even when her designs took directions he hadn't anticipated. This consistency created the predictable environment essential for Song-si's healing. The presence of genuine choice became paramount in their relationship. When an international luxury conglomerate approached Song-si with an offer to establish her brand across European markets, the opportunity represented both professional validation and a potential geographic challenge to their relationship. "This could mean relocating to Milan for at least 6 months, she explained, preparing herself for resistance or manipulation disguised as concern. Mr. Han surprised her by immediately pulling out his tablet and researching the best neighborhoods near the design district. "You've earned this opportunity through your talent alone," he said. "I can fly to Italy as easily as I can cross town to see you here." His unhesitating support reinforced that her success and independence weren't threats to their relationship but essential components of it. Song-chi realized she was experiencing something new, a partnership where her ambitions were celebrated rather than contained. The most profound changes emerged in quiet moments rather than dramatic declarations. When Song-si instinctively apologized for disagreeing with him during a dinner conversation, Mr. Han gently noted the pattern. "Your opinions aren't transgressions requiring forgiveness," he said. "They're valuable expressions of who you are." These small recalibrations of their interaction slowly transformed their dynamic. When Mr. Im. Han found himself falling into decision-making without consultation, a CEO's habit, Song-si learned to identify and address these moments without fear of retaliation. Their commitment to equality required constant vigilance and communication from both sides. Perhaps the most significant transition came when they confronted their intimate relationship. Physical closeness carried complicated implications given their history. They approached this dimension with deliberate care, establishing explicit consent practices, and creating space for Song-si to explore her desires without pressure or expectation. Healing isn't linear, Song-si reflected after a particularly difficult week, when memories of her past captivity had resurfaced unexpectedly. "Some days I feel completely free of what happened, and others I'm right back in that gilded cage. Those moments don't erase our progress," Mr. Han responded. "They're reminders of why we're approaching this differently now." 6 months after her runway debut, Song-si stood before the gleaming facade of her flagship store in the heart of the design district. The window display featured her signature sustainable textiles transformed into striking contemporary silhouettes. Her vision, under her name, created on her terms. Mr. Han stood beside her, not as owner or savior, but as partner and witness to her triumph. When photographers requested they pose together for the opening, Song-si felt no hesitation. This public moment represented a genuine choice rather than coercion or performance. Later that evening, after the celebration ended and they walked together along the river, Song-si reflected on their extraordinary journey. "We shouldn't have worked," she said. Everything about how we began was wrong. Perhaps that's why we've been so careful about how we continue, he replied. We understand exactly what's at stake. As our story of Song Si and Mr. Han draws to a close, we're reminded of a profound truth about the human spirit. Transformation blooms even in the harshest conditions. Song Si's journey illustrates that, even in the face of extreme betrayal and suffering, personal transformation and resilience are possible when individuals refuse to be defined by their circumstances. What began as a transaction evolved into something neither party expected: authentic connection. MrGopri.org. Han showed us that true love is not about control or possession, but about seeing someone completely and choosing them freely every day. If this tale of resilience touched you, subscribe for more stories exploring the triumph of love over power and the unexpected light that follows our darkest moments.